So, how the Giants win the Super Bowl in 2020, or technically 2021 since it's the 2020 season and the Super Bowl is played in February of the next year. You guys know what I mean. How the Giants are gonna win Super Bowl 55. Now, this is not my personal opinion. I actually think, especially fans of my channel, you guys know, I think the Giants are about a year away. I think we're headed in the very right direction. Our offense is already where it needs to be, in my opinion. It's just the defense that needs improvement, and I think we could be a contender for Super Bowl 56. But 55, not so sure. But this was a fun and interesting idea to tackle. I spent a couple of days kind of thinking about how I can go about this, how I would frame it, and well, here's what I got for y'all. So before we even get into the 2020 season, first we gotta talk about how we actually got here, right? So let's do a quick recap of the 2019 season. So last year, if we just rewind time a little bit, last year around this time, Eli Manning was still playing in the NFL. He wasn't retired yet, and he was still the starting quarterback of the New York Giants. And of course, we had a very interesting draft in where we took Daniel Jones, the quarterback out of Duke, 6th overall, and the heir, the successor to Eli Manning. Everybody realized that once you took him 6th overall. What everybody didn't realize was that this dude was going to be an actual franchise quarterback, at least what he's shown in his rookie year, because the amount of hate and just disgust that the media showed this kid, which I already covered in a separate video. You should go check that out. But everybody knew he was going to start at some point. When the beginning of the season, it was pretty promising. It was very, very promising. And by beginning, I mean literally the beginning, the very first drive of the season, where the Giants defense held the Cowboys from scoring and their offense marched down the field and did score. After that drive, the Giants' performance completely decreased. They lost their first 2 games. Eli came under heavy fire as usual, but this time it was even kind of a little bit more so from the fans and the media, because he was benched following, the week 2 loss against the Bills. Of course, there are other factors that played into this. The wide receiving core was heavily injured. We were starting to get a little bit of injuries on the defensive side of football with the linebackers, but the offensive line was performing really good. So there's definitely a great argument against benching Eli, and of course, because we had a dude waiting in the wings there in Daniel Jones. And the team they were going up against at that time, the Tampa Bay Bucks, they looked pretty good. If I'm not mistaken, they already beat the Saints the week before. So it's not as though the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were about to be an absolute, cakewalk, an absolute walkover. But guess what? It was a tough game. We were down 18 points, and Daniel Jones, aka Danny Dimes, the whipping boy of the media, proceeded to have possibly the best rookie debut ever in the major 18-point comeback win, where he posted 336 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 28 rushing yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns. This was also a game where the best running back in the league, Saquon Barkley, went down with a high ankle sprain. He was projected to be out 6 to 8 weeks. But Danny Dimes comes in and shows hope, shows a lot of promise in his debut. Of course, it was just his debut. DJ went on to win their next game against the Redskins, but this time he had a lot more help from an injured Giants defense that took advantage of a terrible Redskins offense. But even without the injuries, the Giants defense had been struggling. At 2-2, things looked bright, but the Giants offensive line play, this is where it started to severely decline. Partly because, they had a new and actually a very green quarterback back there, not an experienced play caller that knows how to handle the pocket. And partly because I think it just was not a good offensive line, and they probably played at their best at the beginning of the season, and then didn't take long for defenses to figure out how to get past their schemes. And well, the Giants coaching started to decline also, so it's not as though the offensive line coaching was getting any better. In fact, it was getting worse. This play declined so much that it led to them having the 2 worst tackles in the league when you're putting them against the pressure numbers and the sacks numbers. And the defense, it couldn't stop a nosebleed for anything. And that terrible defense just went on to have more and more injuries. We were starting a 4-string linebacker in David Mayo. Pair that with a non-existent running game, because not only was Saquon out, but Wayne Gallman was also out, and we eventually ended up, running Eli Penny and Buck Allen back there. Then we had a wide receiving core that was also hit majorly. We already had the Golden Tate suspension, and now Sterling Shepard was going out with major concussions around this time as well. So all in all, the Giants as a team was just very injured. Eventually, the Giants just ended up going 4 4-12, winning only against the Redskins, twice, and the Dolphins in Eli's last start. And the Bucs game, of course. Now the season, it was pretty damn disappointing for a team in year 2 of its rebuild that seemed to take more steps backwards than forward. Once again, the coaching on both sides regressed immensely, leading to almost all the coaching staff being fired at season's end, and many players not living up to their contracts or living up to the trades that they came in through, a la Alec Ogletree, and that led to them being either cut or released from the team, with the key dudes being Janoris Jenkins, Alec Ogletree, and Antoine Bethea, he was released just a couple months ago. But even in all that negativity, there was a lot of flashes, a lot of great promise that was seen. Particularly in our boy Daniel Jones, the quarterback, who had a great rookie season with 3,027 passing yards, 24 passing touchdowns, 12 interceptions, posting a 61.9 completion percentage. And despite all the drawbacks, and he had a breakout receiving talent in Darius Lane, who had 48 receptions, 740 receiving yards, and 8 receiving touchdowns. A guy that didn't even start all the games and really didn't even start to see the field until week 5 against the Vikings. These weren't the only rookies that had a great impact on the team. We're talking Dexter Lawrence and O'Shane Ximines, particularly Lawrence, who graded out as one of the best defensive rookies in the entire league, had a great impact on this Giants team. Their draft class of 2019 was super underrated when reviewed, let's say right after the draft. Just post-haste, everybody was making their own opinions, but it turned out to be probably one of the best draft classes in the entire NFL, but they don't get recognition for that. And of course, there's other talents such as Jabril Peppers, who when was in there, proved to be a great starting safety, and Ryan Conley, even though it was a small sample size, he's also another rookie. He still performed well and admirably when in there. So with this in mind, the Giants I don't want to say hit the reset button, but definitely had to get a new look to the team in terms of coaching staff, because they got rid of the old ones. Then they had to. It was exactly what needed to be done. And then they went on and they hired a coaching staff that I compare to the Avengers. Yeah, head coach Joe Judge may be an unknown. No matter how good his speeches are, and I do mean his speeches are great, and how well he's handled this crazy offseason that contained, coronavirus, the racial injustice protests, not being able to meet up with your team, not being able to actually coach your team, be there in person and see what's happening. He's handled it pretty well. We don't know how good of a coach he is until he hits the field. But going back to what I said, a coaching staff like that, the Avengers, he's walking into the best possible coaching room to help him be successful. He's got a great offensive coordinator with years of head coaching experience in Jason Garrett, whose offense fits the Giants beautifully. He's got a tight ends coach that's also a former head coach in Freddie Kitchens on the team that can help Evan Ingram maybe take a step forward in trying to be a bit more healthy, or help the backup Caden Smith become that new receiving threat. A great quarterbacks coach in Jerry Shaplinski, somebody very underrated, worked with Tom Brady, Jimmy Garoppolo, and Jacoby Brissett back in New England. The best running back coach in college football in Burt Burns that came over and announced paired up with the best running back in NFL football. A great wide receivers coach, super underrated. Took Darius Lane, a dude that couldn't catch a cold if he wanted to, and turned him in one offseason into a legitimate receiving threat. And of course, one of my favorite signings, probably the best offensive line coach in the NFL, and Mark Colombo, who has helped turn that Dallas Cowboys offensive line into what it is today. And don't sleep on the defensive side. On the defensive side, we got a bunch of dudes that have a great experience and success on the college level. Now, I'll admit, the college level success doesn't always translate, but these are coaches, not players, so sometimes it's a bit better. Coach Spence, Coach Chaos from Penn State, coach one of the best defensive lines in college football, had great success there. Now is our defensive line coach. Brett Bielema, the guy who worked with the Patriots defensive line, one of the best in the league, is now over here on the Giants as our outside linebackers coach. We got Georgia's old outside linebackers coach coming in as our inside linebackers coach. He coached them during their college football championship run, not the run where they won it. Obviously, they didn't win. This was a couple years ago when they went up against, I think it was Clemson, and they came up short. But nevertheless, that was a college championship level defense. He's on our team now. And a bunch of other defensive and offensive assistant coaches whose names are slipping my mind right now, but are way better than what we had last year. Of course, the defense is topped off by Patrick Graham, a guy who's had experience all over the league and also all over the defense. He's basically coached every position group on defense, from defensive line down to secondary, in his years in the NFL. So yeah, while the head coach might be somebody completely new and we have no idea how he's going to perform, he's walking into a pretty damn good situation in the coaching room where he's going to have a lot of help to get this offense and the defense of the New York Giants going, one of the youngest and hungriest teams in the league. Now, of course, they entered the offseason with the main areas of need being middle linebacker, cornerback, offensive tackle, and pass rusher. And in my opinion, they addressed, or they at least tried to address, all of these with underrated signings in Blake Martinez, James Bradbury, Kyler Fackrell, and Cam Fleming. Notice how each of these dudes try to target one of those areas of need, with Blake Martinez in the linebacker, Bradbury the cornerback, Fackrell the outside linebacker to try and help out that pass rush, and Fleming the offensive tackle. Another thing I love about them is that the three main dudes in Fackrell, Bradbury, and Martinez are all either entering or in their prime. Very young guys, around 26 or so. And they've all had a good history in the NFL. Martinez, for the past 3 years, the leading tackler in the NFL, where he was actually misused in the Packers defense. This is something I've said since we signed him. People are saying he was just a dude that was a cleanup tackler. Even if he was, the fact that he was misused leads me to believe he could be even better. And he had his best years in terms of pass defense under Patrick Graham, who is the new Giants defensive coordinator, on for 3 years, $30 million. Bradbury, a top 15 corner in the league without a doubt, has been slept on since entering the league with Carolina. He has the potential to hit top 10 as he's just entering his prime, and he held his own against the very best receivers in the league with Michael Thomas, Mike Evans, and Julio Jones. Comes in and automatically our cornerback number one that they got cheap when you compare it to the Byron Jones signing. 3 years, $45 million. Kyler Fackrell, a low-risk, high-reward deal similar to the one of Marcus Golden back in 2019. He had 10-plus sacks in 2018 when he was not only a starter, but was also under Patrick Graham, our new defensive coordinator. 1 year, $4.6 million. And Cam Fleming, another low-risk, high-reward signing, a true and tested veteran swing tackle in the NFL that has played and started for two of the best offensive line in the league in Dallas and New England. Potential starter with most likely great offensive line depth, and you'll see why. 1 year, $3.5 million, because they had an amazing draft. Andrew Thomas, 4th overall, just the best offensive tackle in that draft. And even if you don't agree with me that he was the best offensive tackle in that draft, he was one of the best. There was 3 guys or 4 guys, depending how you looked at it, that everybody knew were the guys to take. Andrew Thomas was up there. In my opinion, he's the best left tackle out of the draft, and he's the only one that's ready to play left tackle right away. That's what he's played for most of his years at Georgia. Of course, his rookie year, he was a right tackle, but he has the most experience out of anybody. Amazing technique and strength, very underrated strength, and he fits this Giants offense a lot better than somebody like a Mekhi Becton or a Jedrick Wills does. This dude is not only going to help Daniel Jones stand upright and not get sacked, but you know for sure he's going to help Saquon Barkley, because in my opinion, his best attribute is his run blocking game, even though you got people that say it's his pass protection. And then we got an absolute steal in Xavier McKinney in the 2nd round. The best safety in the NFL draft was supposed to go in the 1st round, probably to the Cowboys, but he slipped all the way into the 2nd and we got him. And then they just continue to build up the offensive line. The potential future right tackle in Matt Peart, a potential future center, but might be a good just guard depth in Shane Lemieux, and a good cornerback in Darnay Holmes that has the potential to be a starting slot corner in the NFL. So you take a good hard look at this team entering the 2020 season. You take a look at its players. One of the youngest teams in the league, just packed to the brim with potential. The problem is the coaches have to unlock that potential. They have to unlock all that Danny Dimes can offer. They have to properly utilize what Saquon is currently offering. They have to try and keep the wide receiving core and the tight end healthy. And they have to build the offensive line with the great pieces that they have in place. But all the puzzle pieces are there. You just got to put it together. On the defensive side, it's a bit more difficult. Like I said, I personally think we're a year away, but you have the same pieces there when it comes to the linebacking core and secondary. Definitely a bit more work needed on the outside linebacker and pass rushing core in general. But we still got one of the best defensive line in the league with Leonard Williams, Dexter Lawrence, and Dalvin Tomlinson. The team is there. It's headed in the right direction, and the coaching staff has to do their job now. So for me to preview the actual 2020 season and how they win the Super Bowl, how they get to the playoffs, how they win the big game, the coaching staff does its job. But first, we got to talk about the actual odds, man. The Giants are currently the 14th best team in the NFC, tied for the 26th best in terms of odds, with 60-1 odds to win the Super Bowl in the entire NFL. we already knew it was going to be an uphill battle, but this is just the Vegas odds, and you can see how kind of far-fetched it is. Every season in the NFL, there's 12 teams to make it to the playoffs and have a chance to get to the big game. But even then, there's like always around 16 in total that have a real chance of making it when you consider, you know, during the regular seasons, there's teams in the hunt for a playoff spot. For the past 3 years, the Giants haven't been one of those teams. We only won 12 games in that time. This year, however, our chances are just better because it went from 6 teams per conference to 7 teams per conference as the NFL expanded their playoffs. So the total number of playoff caliber teams are also raised. Let's get into the regular season. They need to get up to a hot start. It's absolutely necessary. They have some of the toughest opponents during the first 6 weeks of the season. We're talking a lineup that consists of Steelers, Bears, 49ers, Rams, Cowboys, Redskins, and the reason I say 6 is because the Redskins' defensive line is no joke. But it's absolutely necessary that to get off to a hot start. The offensive line, it needs to click immediately because they're going to be immediately put to the test. They need to start opening up holes for Saquon day one and create magic through the run game, and they need to get some magic to keep Daniel Jones upright. They cannot have this guy being sacked twice a game for each of these games. The offensive line, which would usually, I would give them a break and be like, all right, let them take at least half of the season or so for them to click. If you're talking about making a Super Bowl run, it has to click day one, play one, immediately. We're talking Daniel Jones and Saquon. Saquon, as I said, he's my MVP vote for this season. Of course, he might not win it if the Giants miss the playoffs, but listen, dude is bound to have a bounce back year, and he has a better offensive line that he's ever had before. He's going to do some great things. He needs to do great things. He needs to have like 1,800 rushing yards, 500 receiving yards at the very least on both sides. Definitely MVP caliber numbers, and definitely will help propel this team into the playoffs. Daniel Jones got to have that breakout year too that I've been talking about. Something else that I also spoke on, and I believe he will do. He has a great coaching in Jason Garrett and Jerry Saplinski to help him along the way. He's been working on his, throwing angles and working on his game mentally with David Cutcliffe in the offseason. Been working on building up his body to be stronger. Daniel Jones needs to have that breakout year, at least 4,000 passing yards and 30 touchdowns. And of course, that defense needs to step up. Horrendous defense last year. They need to be at least top 15 for anything to happen. Now, the NFC East will be a division, in my opinion, won by 10 or 11 games. And momentum gained early on by the Giants will help carry them to this record. They'll have 2 wins against the Redskins, 1 each against Dallas and Philly, which is honestly, in this division, would be good enough. They need to win at least 6 other games on the tough schedule at that point. In this universe, they do. Opening up against the Steelers and pulling out a surprise win against a team that, like them and basically like every other team, faced a very strange offseason. But the Steelers, I think, might be vulnerable on the offensive end of the football. Their defense is completely nasty, but Big Ben is a year older. He's a little bit more injury prone. He's probably going to start declining. Who knows? They can take advantage. They can then win against the Bears. Both games, once again, is going to be heavily carried by the Giants' offense. Their defense will struggle early on before finding their footing, like maybe halfway through the season against the Buccaneers, where the Giants at that point would stand, in my opinion, at 3-4. And this is where their season starts to make a turn, and also their defense starts to make a turn as they finally play as if they want to sniff a Super Bowl berth, and they finally maybe reach that top 15 caliber defense, whether it's in scoring, in pass defense, and rushing yards. I'm talking overall. They then rattled off wins against the Bucks and others in a 7-game win streak. So that's Bucks, Redskins, Eagles, Bengals, Seahawks, Cardinals, and Browns. They will then, however, be stopped by what is probably going to be one of the best teams, if not the best team in the NFL next year, the powerful Ravens, who are also in the hunt for a Super Bowl. They do, however, end the season on a positive note, closing out the Cowboys in an important Week 17 win in terms of morale and maybe even playoff seeding, and then once again, momentum to carry them into those playoffs. And that's how the Giants could end up 11-5 and get into good seeding with the playoffs. Now, before I talk about how they actually perform in these playoffs, here's a quick prediction of how I think the NFC will play out from the NFC West. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to list 2 teams from each of the divisions, and I'm going to cut out the one team that doesn't make it, as there's 7 teams now in the playoffs. So from the NFC West, I think it's going to end up being the 49ers and the Seahawks. 49ers, I don't think they're going to really go through much of a Super Bowl hangover. I think that defense is too good to go through that. And I know some people might compare it to the Bears. Well, the Bears had a great defense, but the Bears didn't make it all the way to the Super Bowl one, and I do think that the offense of the 49ers will still be good enough to make it back into the playoffs. And of course, Seattle, a playoff mainstay for basically the past decade, I don't really see them going down. They had a weird draft as they usually do, but their offseason was pretty good so far. In the NFC South, is going to come down to the Saints and the Bucks. The Saints, no-brainer. The Bucks, while I don't think they're going to be Super Bowl contenders like everybody thinks they are just because Tom Brady is there now, I do think that they are going to be a playoff caliber team, maybe 10 or 11 win team. The NFC North, it would be the Vikings and the Packers. The North right now is kind of weird to predict. I don't really see the Lions taking a step anywhere this year. They're maybe a couple years away, but I don't think the Lions are a playoff team yet. Maybe if Matthew Stafford stays fully healthy, but that is, a caveat that we're not counting on right now. And the Bears, their offense is in shambles, and they only have a good defense. I don't think that team is going anywhere. And of course, the NFC East will be the Giants, and the other team I'm going to pick is the Cowboys, who in a regular, non-fantasy season like I'm doing right now, I really do think it would be the Cowboys next year. They're, in my opinion, one of the best teams in the league when it comes to talent on the roster. So the one team that doesn't make the cut for me was going to be the Packers. I might get a little bit of backlash for that, but I said it even last year. They were a Week 12 win team last year, and they did not improve in this offseason. They declined more than anything. They had a terrible draft, and their free agency was subpar. And I don't be surprised if Aaron Rodgers tries to get back at the owners and the GM by tanking, pulling a 2018 like they did to get rid of Mike McCarthy to kind of get revenge on this team that really did abandon him. All the Packers needed to do was improve his offensive weapons, and they could have made another run, but not only did they not do that, but everything else decreased. So let's get back to the Giants playoffs. And finishing at 11-5, I honestly don't know whether they would be a wild card team or whether they'd be straight into the divisional playoffs, mostly because I'm not sure how the 7th seed and the 7th seed playoffs are going to work. But 11-5 in the NFC is no joke, and considering that it is 7 teams, I would say it should place them at a comfortable 4th seed. So they do avoid wildcard weekend, which I think would be necessary. And, the NFC is just so strong. I'm not sure if a wildcard team in today's NFL from the NFC can actually win the Super Bowl, let alone make it all the way there. I think the last team that did make it was Atlanta, and of course, we do know how that turned out. So the bye week gives the extremely young and hungry roster time to rest and prepare for their matchup. And we know, obviously, in this video, they're going to make it through to the Super Bowl. So I think they're going to ride the momentum from the way they closed off the season easily through the divisional round, and then they're going to come up against a tough matchup against a team like the Saints, 49ers, and maybe even a surprise like the Cowboys in the NFC Championship. Now, on the NFC side of things, I do think it will be a run first and heavy defensive game to decide who goes to Super Bowl 55. And of course, the Giants do make it there, their first appearance since winning it all 9 years ago in Super Bowl 46, where they faced the toughest challenge yet in one of the two young and hungry teams. It's either going to be the Chiefs, led by Mahomes, looking to make a repeat, or the Ravens, led by Lamar Jackson, seeking their first championship since Super Bowl 47, kind of similar to what this Giants team is doing here. Now, unlike the NFC Championship game, which I think is going to be run first and defensive heavy, I think the Super Bowl is going to be more of an offensive game just by the nature of the teams that the Giants are facing. But they will still try to rely heavily on Saquon Barkley to have that time of possession, have the control of the clock, and try to open up the deep passing lanes for Daniel Jones to bomb it downfield with precision to Darius Slayton or maybe even Sterling Shepard. So after a game where we see an amazing display of offenses and defensive strategies, the Giants do come out on top as world champions in the most improbable way, a storied season that absolutely nobody expecting from this team after going 12-36 the 3 years prior, starting a rebuild what seemed like 2 times in just 2 years, taking a running back second overall that was mobbed by the media, and then taking a QB that was absolutely ridiculed after signing a rookie head coach, working through the crazy year in 2020. They are world champions. Now, do I think this is going to happen? No. But if the Giants do win the Super Bowl this year, this is one of the only ways I can see it happening. And it was once again a fun and interesting idea to explore, so let me know what you guys think. Put your comments down below, and I'm out. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share. I'll catch y'all in the next one.